But yeah, it'll be going up on our website at some point. But my name is Sammy. I am one of the staff members here at the Backpacking Club. Nathan, if you want to introduce yourself really quick.
Sure. Hi, I'm Nathan. I'm also one of the staff at the Backpacking Club, and I'll be helping present.
Yeah, awesome. So we're just here to talk to you guys today about camping in the middle of all this craziness and how to recreate safely. We'll be touching on like dispersed camping and leave no trace principles, stuff like that. But yeah, there's plenty of staff members here. If you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. But yeah, feel free to jump in with anything if you guys have anything to add or questions or anything like that. We're really here to help you guys and just be a resource. So yeah, without further ado, we can just jump right into things. So I mentioned dispersed camping. If anybody doesn't know what dispersed camping is, that basically just means you're camping in like undeveloped primitive campsites, is the word people like to use a lot. That basically means there's like no services or amenities. You kind of just like show up in your self-contained vehicle or pod or whatever you're doing, and you plop yourself on a pod of public land, which is super great. So public land, basically that means anything run by like the Bureau of Land Management or BLM. You might see that acronym a lot. Any like kind of national forest, and even national parks. There are like some restrictions within like national parks. Usually that means like you're camping like a mile off road or something like that. But yeah, you can like disperse camp in places like Death Valley or like Zion. There's plenty of options, and it's a really great way to explore a lot of our public lands. A lot of like tax dollars go into making sure that these lands are accessible and beautiful. And of course, we want to keep them that way. So we're just going to go over some guidelines to how to do this safely. But yeah, it's just a great option and a great alternative to like reserved campsites or stuff like that. But yeah, and just another thing to note, you want to make sure you're spending less than 14 days in one area. This is just to make sure that we're lessening our impact on the land. So after that, like you have to move at least 5 road miles away. And yeah, that's just like a thing to make sure that we're not like permanently harming like any vegetation or anything like that. But yeah, there's certain like guidelines to how you want to set up a dispersed campsite. Obviously you don't want to be plopped down, like can't just do it anywhere. There's ways to do it safely. And so that's stuff like you want to be 100 feet from any water source to make sure we're not like infecting the water with like, you know, our cooking water and like any waste we might have. So yeah, you want to be away from the water sources. You want to be like a couple 100 feet from like the road. So sorry, the road is like usually the typical other thing you want to stay away from. But yeah, so we'll jump right into more of that. So what are the pros to dispersed camping? There are plenty. Let me tell you, I am a huge fan of dispersed camping. That is like the one greatest thing that COVID has given us. One silver lining is I think it's a really great way to like see the outdoors in like a new way, because you're really like away from people. And it's usually like places I wouldn't normally explore. So that's been a really like positive aspect of recreating in this time. So it's usually free. You kind of just plop down wherever. And yeah, sometimes there's permits you need to look at and reservations for like specific areas, like more popular places. Like dispersed camping is kind of an umbrella for like car camping, and like even backpacking could technically be called dispersed camping. So if you're backpacking, you want to look into like permits and stuff for like the more popular places. Like a lot of the places in the Sierra Nevada do require permits because they're so popular. And normally they're like really free, or they're like really cheap. It's just to make sure that we're like regulating like how many people are in the wilderness at once, you know, make sure we're not like having 30 people storm like very sensitive vegetation and environments. And it's also to make sure like people keep track of like if you're disappearing into the wilderness for 3 days and you're supposed to be back, you'll have like a permit, like a record on site of like who's out there, and if like, you know, search and rescue needs to come out, they know who to contact. So that's why permits are like really important to look at and make sure you have them if you need them. But yeah, there's we're actually going to be having a seminar about like how to acquire permits and stuff like that. So just keep an eye on for that. I believe it's next week. But we'll be posting about that in the Slack. Yeah, dispersed camping is also really good for groups. Obviously that looks a little different right now, but for the backpacking club and specifically, we'll take like, you know, 30 kids on a trip. And so it's really great to have dispersed camping as an option, because for like reserved campgrounds, you know, like the maximum people you can have there is like 6 or 8 people. So for dispersed camping, you just come up, roll up with your squad with like a bunch of tents, bunch of food, and have a great time. It's awesome. And so yeah, you typically get a lot more solitude because you have like miles and miles of land you can pick from. You can just find a nice spot away from people. So yeah, that's what's great about it, about camping like that now, is, you know, we don't really want to be near a lot of people. So dispersed camping is definitely a great way to recreate now, as opposed to like, really popular campgrounds or national parks or whatnot. So yeah, there's lots of great things about dispersed camping. Big dispersed camping guy right here. So yeah, cons. Because it is like actual wilderness, there are no amenities, which is sometimes like a big barrier to that. You want to be bringing your own water, bringing your own ways to dispose of waste. So a little bit about both of those, like that's why dispersed camping can be considered like an umbrella for backpacking. It's similar in that like you want to be sure you're like bringing enough water for where you're going, or that you can access it. Like usually at most like big land masses, there will be like a visitor center of some sort that you can typically fill up water at. And most like dispersed camping places, if you're like not backpacking, you'll have a car, so like you can always fill up at like an RV station or something like that. But yeah, if you're like in the Sierras, like maybe you can just be filtering your own water. But yeah, all things to just consider. You want to be like bringing your own water source, or like having your own water source readily available that is like reliable. Yeah, and so if you are like bringing, or if you're not bringing your own water and you're filtering it on site, you just want to make sure that you have the things you need and be prepared. I don't know if any of you were at my backcountry cooking seminar back in the day last quarter, but we did touch on like how to filter water in the backcountry and all that stuff. So if you guys have any more questions about that, I can totally stick around and dive into that if anyone is curious. But yeah, moving on to bathrooms. Please dispose of your waste safely. Nobody wants to see any waste sticking out on trail where it's supposed to be pristine and beautiful. That is where we all come to the backcountry, and we all want to preserve it for future generations to come. So it's really important to dispose of waste safely. We'll talk on that a little bit more as we touch on leave no trace. But yeah, you want to pack in your waste, pack it out. Also be aware, like if you're camping in bear country, you do want to be like having a safe way to store it. And that means like a bear vault or like a communal food locker. I know Yosemite does a lot of that. Like they'll have just like food lockers that like backpackers or like car campers can just like store their stuff at if you're not staying at like a reservable campsite. So just please be aware of that. Bear country is like so serious. So if you are in like the Sierra Nevadas or like Yellowstone, it's like safer for the bears and for you to store your food safely. So we just want to be sure that we're being very cautious about how we're spending our time in the backcountry. And those are like the big things to be worried about. Also, you want to get a fire permit if you're planning on having a campfire. Yeah, you don't always need a campfire, but if you do want one for like the vibes to cook your food, whatever you need, California at least specifically, I know you can do just like a quick online test. I just got mine like last week, and it's good for like a year. It's super cool. You just print it out. Just a lot of like good information to be aware of, because wildfire is such a huge problem right now, especially in California. So please do not take any of that stuff lightly. It is so important. So it's always good to be educated on the subject, and to build your own campfire safely. So yeah, you can do that online, no problem at all. So obviously not a lot of like huge cons, but just things to be aware of for dispersed camping. But yeah, Nathan's going to take it over for this next slide. All right.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about the COVID protocols, since right now just meet restrictions, especially outdoors. So just some general recommendations is to travel with your households or people you're usually in contact with. Avoid like doing it in like huge groups. And then also something else is to minimize time in public spaces. So this is mainly if like when you're trying to get to the camping location, your hiking location, you want to try to avoid having to having contact with other people, such as in gas stations or public restrooms, and to that's why we would recommend that you try to recreate locally. So try to visit spots that are nearby and avoid like going too far away across state borders. It's better to choose local areas. And then also something else that we advise is to bring masks on hikes, and then follow the typical guideline of maintaining 6 feet distance. And this is to basically respect other people and to try to and help with that social distancing as you're hiking, while also enjoying the outdoors. And some other important things, also washing your hands often, something typical. And also when you're looking out to see which areas you want to visit nearby, there's going to be due to COVID and like the recent wildfires, there's going to be some restrictions, but we'll go more into that later on and how COVID's affecting all of that. So now we're going to go into the LNT principles, or also known as Leave No Trace. And Leave No Trace basically is an outdoor ethics organization, and they've come up with 7 principles that you should follow whenever you're recreating outdoors. So the first thing is to know before you go, basically to plan ahead and know exactly what you're getting into as you go out to backpacking or hiking. So what that involves is basically planning ahead, making sure that you know what the area is like, and like studying the geography, studying the geography, looking at the trails you're going to, planning ahead, making sure that you know what exactly you're getting yourself into, so that if you making sure that you know exactly how it's like, so that you are prepared and you're not like going in surprise or not sure about how you're going. So that includes like looking up like the maps of the location, getting having GPS ready, downloading maps if that's what you need, especially if you're going to somewhere offline. So that's what principle one involves. And then we have the second principle, which is basically to travel only on durable surfaces, and also camping in uh, areas that have been used before, or like designated camping areas. So what this involves is, since hiking or backpacking can involve both on-trail hiking and off-trail hiking. So in terms of on trail, you always want to stick to the trail that's there. You want to avoid cutting this making a shortcut between switchbacks. You don't want to do that, because that's going to damage the vegetation or plants there. And then in terms of off trail travel, you want to avoid that if possible, but sometimes that may not be possible, especially if you're traveling in a more remote area, or if you're doing something like canyoneering. In that case, you want to try to stick to durable surfaces like hard rock or packed dirt, instead of trampling on sensitive areas like meadows, which can be easily damaged just by just like walking across. And something else that you want to avoid stepping on if you have to go off trail for any reason is there's something called a biological soil crust. It may seem to be just like a bunch of pile of dirt, but it's actually a living crust. Yeah, so that's what it looks like there. And make sure, if you see this while hiking, it's pretty common in dry areas like the deserts or the northern slopes near the deserts. Um, Make sure to avoid stepping on this. It may seem just like dirt, but it's actually a living crust, and it can take, depending on the location, a few decades to up to 1,000 years to regenerate and fully recover if damaged. So try to avoid stepping on them. And now going back to leave no trace, principle number 3. So what we should do is to avoid always pack in, pack out. So uh, make sure to when if you have any trash, bring it with you. Don't like dump, don't just don't litter. And then there's also, if you're hiking, they have these designated trash cans, or like that are bear safe, and then you would have to put everything in there. And also with whenever you need to use the restroom, if you want to dig a cat hole, and or if you're doing any of that, try to do it 200 feet away from a water source. So that would be like a river or lake, and that's to avoid contamination, and also to try to keep that water safe for wildlife as well. And the same can be said for trying to using soap. Even if you're using a biodegradable soap, you still want to try to minimize the impact that you have on the environment. So that's why you should always do it somewhere away, at least 200 feet away from a water source. So that's the main guideline in terms of using restroom or using soap, any of that. And then now on to principle number 4, we have just basically not taking anything out from the natural environments. Like don't like scratch your name on trees. That should be obvious, but I've seen it uh, pretty often on hiking. Just don't take anything from the area. Don't scratch anything on the rocks. Don't damage any of the plants. Just leave it as it is, so that the next person after you can enjoy the area as well. And then the 5th principle is to basically be very careful with campfire. A few guidelines would be trying to use existing fire rings, and then using wood from a local source, like purchasing it from a local source, or responsibly gathering it from the area. So you can actually like choose as long as they allow it, you can collect firewood from the area and try to avoid it doing that in areas where there's a low wood stock. So that would be like in deserts or high alpine areas where the wood stock is low, and you want to avoid collecting wood from that area and try to purchase it locally. And then sixth principle is with wildlife. You want to try to respect the wildlife as you're recreating outdoors. You want to avoid trying to keep your distance away from wildlife, making sure to pack in all your food, try to avoid avoid any ways for the animals to like access your food or anything like that, and basically maintaining safe distance. And again, with like the soap and all that stuff, doing it away from water source, because they do rely on that for survival. And then finally, principle number 7, we want to respect other visitors as well as we're outdoors and recreating. So that would be so of course during COVID, that would be trying to if you can wear a mask while you're hiking. That would be packing out your dog poo if you bring your dog along. And also there's a common there's a yield guidelines where if you're sharing a trail with horses and bicyclists, the way how it goes is that the bicyclists are supposed to yield to the people on horse and the hikers, and then hikers are supposed to yield to horseback. So make sure to follow that, and it should be good. And another guideline is in terms of when you're going on a slope, so on a hill, the downhill, people going downhill should be yielding to the people going uphill. So just a few guidelines to help respect others as you're hiking. And that's LNT briefly, yeah. So now we're moving on to TREAD principles, which is another set of guidelines for outdoor ethics, and it's pretty similar to LNT, leave no trace. So the 5 principles are listed here, and the first one is travel responsibly. So it's similar to, it's basically sticking to the trails that are designated trails and trying not to damage vegetation as you're hiking, and basically camping in designated areas. And then respecting rights of others, again, similar to the last principle of leave no trace, basically respecting others as you're hiking. And then third principle, educate yourself, is going to be similar to the first principle of leave no trace, where you should be planning ahead and making sure you know the area in general before you go out and hike. And then fourth one, avoid sensitive areas. Again, making sure that you do not damage or trample on sensitive vegetation such as meadows, and then trying to stick to areas that are durable like hard surfaces, rock, and avoiding again the biological soil crust. And finally, the last principle is do your part, basically basically doing your part to keep the area good for others who want to come recreate after you. So that would be like picking up litter and packing in, packing out after yourself. Basically maintaining the place and making sure it doesn't get damaged for future use.
Sorry, I was figuring out Zoom. Thank you so much, Nathan. That was so informative. I always look, whenever I'm on hikes, I feel like I never remember who to yield to. So I'm glad we cleared that up, because that always confuses me. So yeah, now the question is where to go. I saw in the chat that we're just like wondering how to figure out where we can disperse camp. And that is definitely hard, because there's so many like rules and restrictions, and websites aren't always updated. So like it's so hard to figure out where to go. But here are suggestions. And again, these are just a few places, and mostly in California, because we are trying to recreate locally. But yeah, if you like don't know where to go, or you don't know if something's happening or something's open, you can always feel free to drop it in like the trip planning channel. Like I personally have been to a lot of these places, and I know like staff members and other club members like just are available to you guys as resources. That is what we're here for, is to make sure that people can recreate safely and have a good time while doing that. So yeah, if you're ever like, oh, can I camp here? Like, oh, where should I go here? Just drop it in the trip planning channel. And I'm sure someone will know something about whatever you need answered. But yeah, here's some suggestions. Again, these are all like the 3 random categories I gave. National forests. So the adventure pass, this is something that you will need if you're camping in any of these 4 locations. And not just camping, sometimes it's for day hiking. Really like anywhere you're parking your car in most of these locations, you're gonna need an adventure pass. And these are crazy value, you guys. They're like $5 for the day, $30 for the year. You can split it with your friends, just pass it around. And again, all the money is going to maintain these beautiful wild places that we love so much. So you really want to be making sure that like you are getting the adventure pass. Like, please do not try and get away with like not getting one. Like, it's just $5, and then you don't have to worry about getting like a $60, $70 ticket from parking enforcement. So yeah, get the adventure pass. You can get it from like a Big Five or like an REI, anything like that. You can get it shipped if you want as well. But yeah, so there's a couple of those forests around here. There's also like national park adjacent national forest land. So like if you're going to like Yosemite and you're like, oh my goodness, I don't want to camp inside Yosemite because it's expensive or there's no reservations or it's really crowded. You can camp in like Sequoia National Forest or Sierra National Forest is right around Yosemite. There's Inyo, which is like right by Mammoth. Stanislaus and like Tahoe are up north a little bit more. Yeah, but there's almost always like national forest land that is publicly owned, allowed to be dispersed camped on, right around like a national park, which makes for really easy access. And again, like I was saying before, like there's no reservations or anything. So like it's really great for like if you're like planning a last minute trip or like you don't really know if you want to like be going somewhere because of the weather's like might be bad or like, you know, this is kind of like something you're doing on the fly. National forest land or public land or whatever is great for stuff like that so that you can be flexible in your plans, but still have like an assured place to sleep at night and park your tent. So yeah, those are a few of the national forests. Again, like BLM land, you can just look up like their website. They own a lot of like really popular destinations, and like I had never heard of them before I joined Backpacking Club because they just took a bunch of people up to Joshua Tree last year. Again, also yesterday, I just got back from Alabama Hills for the first time. It is so pretty, you guys. I'm a huge Alabama Hills fan now. If you've ever gone up to Mammoth, it's right on the side of the 395, which is the main highway that takes you up to Mammoth. And yeah, it was just a place like I'd always wanted to stop by. It was super cool. Highly recommend. There's also Carrizo Plain. That is right by like Lake Cachuma up in like Los Padres National Forest. It's really great for like wildflower blooms. And like the 3 days out of the year that it rains, it gets like super green and pretty up there. So yeah, there's also Bonneville Salt Flats. It's kind of like in Utah. I think it's Utah or Arizona. That is also owned by BLM. So you can like camp on salt flats, which is like crazy sick. Other places like Mojave National Preserve, Backpacking Club just took a bunch of people up to Kelso Dunes last year. I don't think you can camp like on the dunes, but like you can camp like right by them, so you can explore the dunes later. Super sick. Yeah, also other national parks like Death Valley, like I mentioned, like you can camp like a mile from roads. And again, if you're like unsure of like, can I camp here? Always like reference like the national forest websites. They have like plenty of very specific like niche closures where you're like, how would I even know this exists? So if you look at their website, there's always like typically like a map of like boundaries where you can camp and like what is national public land that you're allowed to be on. So yeah, sometimes there's like restrictions, but for the most part, like the general rule is like as long as you're away from like water sources and like as long as you're like you can't camp right outside like a developed campground, like that'd be kind of strange. So as long as you're like not near those like high ticket destinations, the answer is probably yes on public land. But yeah, of course, you just want to be prepared and following leave no trace and tread principles and making sure you're camping where you're supposed to be camping. But again, if you're always like, what the heck am I doing? You can always consult. The Backpacking Club Slack is where we drop most of our questions, but I'm sure someone will have some knowledge about whatever you need. But yeah, here's a picture of my beautiful friend Andrew wearing his beautiful glasses. This was from Alabama Hills, literally like 2 days ago. It was gorgeous. But as you can see, we are camping on hard, durable surfaces. We've got our self-contained tent. And yeah, just a word of advice from other people. We're going to talk about this more later as well. But we have a super cool resource doc called the Backpacker's Bible that was put together by our lovely Tyler Bond. And it's a lot of like firsthand information about where to camp. So I have just recently uploaded a thing about my trip to Alabama Hills, but just like one piece of advice if I could offer to anyone about like where to set up your campsite, because you're like looking at this wilderness and you're like, man, where am I gonna put my tent? There's so many options. Let me tell you where not to put your tent. Don't put your tent on an open plain like I did, because the wind came out of nowhere. I was attacked by the wind. My tent, as you can see, very, very tall. you learn something new every day. I had never considered the fact that a tall tent might be a detriment. So yeah, if you have a really tall tent like me, be cautious of the wind, my friends. We had to take down our tent at like 3 a.m. We were all cold and tired and miserable. It was not fun, but also very fun. It'll be a great story to tell our kids in 30 years. So this is the story I'm telling you guys now, is to please don't put your tent on an open plain if you can avoid it. I think we were the only people that didn't figure that out, because everyone else was like nestled in their little rock cove. It was great. But yeah, like things like that are just like things to think about when you're like setting up your tent. You want to be like guarded by the wind. Maybe you like hate this like sunlight coming up in the morning, so you want to like face your tent away. Yeah, obviously you want to be avoiding plants, be away from water sources, away from the road. All things to consider. But again, we live and we learn, and that is so okay. But yeah, that was a great trip, super, super fun experience. And I was glad I was able to do that and do it safely. But yeah, moving on. Nathan is going to share a bunch of his knowledge about what areas are closed. If you haven't noticed, just a little plug. Nathan has been putting a lot of like forest closures and updates and stuff like that, a lot of firsthand knowledge that I personally would not know how to gain anywhere else. So thank you, Nathan, for being our club like resource guy on all this kinds of stuff. So yeah, he's going to talk about that right now.
All right, great. So I'm going to talk about how to figure out what areas are closed. So of course, especially in California, due to all the recent wildfires and also COVID restrictions, a lot of areas are closed. So you want to make sure that when you're going out camping, you want to figure out, making sure that you're not traveling to an area that is closed to visitors. So how to figure out directly, or how I figure out all these closures and stuff. So what you want to do is to go directly to the agency website, or basically the agency that manages the area you're recreating to. So if you're going to a place like Alabama Hills, you would want to check the BLM website. That's where they post all those updates. And then if you're traveling to a place like Yosemite, you want to go to the MPS website. So that's where they post all the updates. So I can actually, I'll go ahead and paste that in the chat right now if you want to see what it looks like. Yeah, so those are links to the main agency websites. You can use them to see what areas are closed. But now we're going to go into basically how more into the SoCal National Forest, since they're nearby UCLA. So due to all the fires and recent fires, a lot of areas of the forest are closed. So such as the Bobcat Fire, which burned Angeles National Forest, a huge chunk of that is closed. So you want to make sure that you go to the forest website to check out and make sure that the area you want to go is not within a closure area. So here at Backpacking Club, we've compiled a list for all the SoCal National Forest. You can take a look there, and that will basically list out all the restrictions in the national forest in Southern California. So it's going to be listing out camping restrictions. Is dispersed camping open? So this list will be periodically updated. So you can always just go over there and check to see if a place you want to go to is closed or open to dispersed camping. So I also paste that in the chat as well. Yeah, so that's where you can go to check out closures. And now we're going to move on to some useful resources. So the Backpacking Club, we've compiled a huge list of all these fun destinations you can visit, and it's all the information about where to go and specific trails, also tips on camping. So it's all in this document here. You can scan the QR code, or you can also use the link, and I'll paste that in chat as well.
And yeah, just a quick note on the Backpackers Bible. This is something that's like continuing to be added to. So like, if you're like, oh my gosh, guys, I must share this knowledge about this incredible place I just went. You guys can like go to the Backpackers Bible, and there is a link to adding like new entries to the Bible. But yeah, we like always want to be adding more stuff. There's a million places to be explored. There's nothing better than like firsthand knowledge about a trip. Like if you just like if you put stuff in the doc, like a lot of times, like I've had people message me about a trip, and like it's great to like ask questions, and like it's sometimes scary to be going to a new place. So it's great to have like someone you kind of know offer their advice and like their firsthand opinions. So yeah.
And we also have we just created a new map of all the backpackers Bible entries, so you can take a look at that as well. If you want to see basically where all of them are, you can click on the pins on the map, and that will link you to the respective entry of the Backpacker's Bible, and I'll paste that here as well. That's the map. And finally, we're going to talk about some other useful resources you can use. So the first two, Campendium and Free Campsites, those can show you some good recommended campsites or RV parks that you can visit or camp, and they also have reviews, so you can visit that and find areas to camp. And in general, a good idea is to look, if you have any questions, you can always send up in the trip planning channel of the Slack, and anyone can answer your question there as well. And then a few other resources, also useful resources. One useful resource that I use to determine that I always use to determine whether or not a specific area is considered BLM or public land. I'll paste it in. It's basically a map for California that will show you specifically which areas are BLM, which areas are Forest Service, so you know exactly where you're camping, and you can just go to the map there. If you just click on an area on the map, it will tell you what type of land it is. So you can know which area or which agency you need to check to see if that area is closed. You can also tell if an area is private land. In that case, you cannot camp there. So it's a useful resource you can use to see which areas in California are public land or private land.
Yeah, so again, just want to emphasize, like, the trip planning channel is really like a godsend in like asking like for firsthand knowledge. I guarantee you, like, someone in that channel has like been to or heard of or whatnot the places that you're trying to go. So again, that's what we're here for. So yeah, how can I access this said trip planning channel? You can do so by going to our Slack. So a quick social media plug. If you guys want to just stay updated on what we're doing, check out our UCLA backpacking Instagram. We're always doing like photo challenges and posting a bunch of like your guys' amazing content. And yeah, just more on like socials coming up. We got our art wine night on this Friday. It's going to be so sick. So please come to that. We also have our website. You can sign up for our newsletter if you guys want to get updates to your email about like what we're going on and what we're doing. And yeah, you can also check out like more resource pages. Nathan's wrote a couple great resource docs on the website about like forest closures and like getting permits and like all that stuff. And I've written a few things about like camping or like cooking while you're camping and like day hikes in LA. There's a lot of like great resources that are all available to you guys for free on our website. And yeah, our Slack is where we drop like all our announcements and just ask for questions. It's a great resource for you guys. So yeah, I think that's all we have planned. Does anyone have any like questions about anything? I know we just spewed a lot of information and a lot of like technical stuff. So if anybody has like anything to like add or question, feel free. Now is the time.